Warning: this podcast deals with mature subject matter that may not be suitable for all listeners. It may contain talk of sex, drugs, alcohol, and abuse. You've been warned.
You're listening to Soberoso, a show dedicated to alcoholics, addicts, survivors of abuse, overcomers of great tragedies, and those of us with mental health issues too. Each week, we invite guests and listeners from around the world to listen in as we have casual conversations with regular people like you and me who've, against all odds, turned their lives around. If you're a family member of someone suffering from alcoholism or addiction, a newcomer or old-timer, or sober curious, this show is for you. Join us now on the Soberoso Podcast with your host, Dora Gosselin, in sharing our passion for recovery.
Hey, beautiful peeps! Welcome back to another episode of Soberoso, the podcast. My name is Dora, and I am your grateful host of this show. If this is your first time joining us, we welcome you with open arms, and if you are a repeat listener, thank you for your continued love and support. Corey, I'm really happy to have you joining us on the Soberoso podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Why don't you tell the listeners and myself where you are joining us from?
Well, so I'm currently joining you from Palm Springs, California.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we live in the Seattle area, but me and my wife are on vacation without our kids for the first time for more than a night or two since our oldest daughter's 6. So it's been 6 years since we've been away. So we're away for a week in Palm Springs. So life is good. Life is good right now. Yeah, it's great. We're just spending time together, connecting and having conversations without being interrupted every 30 seconds.
Well, that's awesome. That's fantastic. You're taking your time out to do this episode.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Oh, well, that's just great. So, Corey, how long have you been clean and sober? Do you mind telling us?
Yeah, it's been just over 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so January
Wonderful.
30th. Yeah, January 30th of 2018 was the moment that my life changed. So
Perfect. That's absolutely fabulous. Congratulations on 3
Thank
years.
you.
That's a huge victory. It's not easy, but it sure is worth it.
I'm sure that many people feel the same way when they look back at that time when their life changed. Parts of it seemed like it was just yesterday, and parts of it seemed like it was a lifetime ago, and a person you don't necessarily know anymore.
That's right. So why don't you tell myself and our listeners out there what was going on in your life about 3 years in January on that fateful day or the time leading up to it?
Yeah, sure. So my struggle had been with opioids. So that was the 10 years of opioid abuse prior to that date was my struggle. And I guess I'll go to that day and tell you why that happened and why I asked for help. Then we can go back and kind of talk about kind of how it all started. But we had just moved to Washington State. My younger brother, who's 10 years younger than me, helped me move a U-Haul truck with all of our stuff from Nebraska. So my wife and kids were back in Nebraska. We were moving to Washington, kind of starting anew. And I was still using at that point. And my brother and I unpacked our U-Haul, moved into a house, and he was just there to help me. And I was in a really dark space. I was really struggling. I felt like my opioid abuse was out of control at that point. Before that, for years, I tried to normalize it. But that was a point where I just felt like I am scared about what my future looks like. And I can't possibly be in this place and ask my wife and kids to move out here with me away from all of our family and friends and her not know this about me. And so, for a good part of 10 years, I laid in bed every night wanting to tell my wife, like on the tip of my tongue, like, Corey, just say this. So this goes back a little bit, I guess, but my opioid abuse was my own secret forever. Not a single person in my life knew, including my wife.
Wow.
And we were married the entire time. And I think that's a little bit of the scary thing about opioids and a lot of drugs, but opioids, especially, it comes in a pill form. It can be hidden very easily. It doesn't have a scent. It doesn't have a smell. It doesn't, necessarily make you slur your speech, or, there's a lot of signs that in other drugs or abuses that maybe it shows physically or how you communicate. And for me, I was able to hide it for 10 years. So it takes me back to Seattle that morning. I wake up the morning after we unpacked the truck, and I didn't sleep, and I needed help. I needed to tell somebody. So I got up and I went to a parking lot. I was going to get coffee for my brother and I sat in this parking lot at 5:30 in the morning, waiting for the doors to open. And I was just a mess. I was in tears. I was bawling. I was so scared for my future or for my life. I didn't know what to do. So it's the first time that I Googled a hotline for opioid abuse, and I dialed the number as I'm sitting there bawling. And a gentleman answers, and he says, "This is an opioid hotline. How can I help?" And I just blurt out, "My name is Corey, and I've been abusing opioids for 10 years, and I need help." And it was the first time I ever said it out loud.
Wow.
Yeah, like I said, there were so many times I wanted to say it. I always felt like if I could just tell somebody, my wife, anybody important to me, if I could tell them this struggle that I'm going through, then that would lift so much of the weight and I could get help. But I just could never do that. And we can get into that later too, on why I think that's such a hard thing to ask for. But so this gentleman answers. I tell him that I'm struggling, that I need help. And he says, "Okay, where are you located?" I tell him where I'm located. He says, "Okay, well, we don't service that area, but I'll transfer you to somebody who does." And so he transfers me, and I'm feeling like, oh my God, I just said it. Thank God. And the line he transfers to is dead. There's not an active line. So I feel heartbroken, and I just don't know what to do. But I was like, right now this is a strength I haven't had before. I said it out loud to somebody. I need to tell somebody. So I rushed home to my brother, and I woke him up at 5:45 in the morning. And my brother's 10 years younger than me, and he's looked up to me his whole life. I've been the person he looks up to. And so for me to come to him was hard, but it was also I had the strength to say it. So I'm just going to say it to whoever will listen right now. And so I just barged into his room and woke him up, and I said, "I need to tell you something." And I just kind of spilled my guts of what I'd been struggling through for the past decade.
Wow. Well, I have naturally so many questions just after that little bit. So let me get cracking.
Please do.
I guess the first question I have is, how does somebody start with opioids? Did that result from a pain injury, or how was that introduced into your life in the first place?
Obviously there's a lot of avenues into drug addiction and abuse, and everybody's is different. And mine was, I was an athlete. As a kid growing up, I was a very good athlete, and I excelled in a lot of sports. And so I took that into, it became my identity. It became who I was and how I found my value. So start there, because I think that's a huge part of this. And so I went to college to play baseball. I had a shoulder surgery in college. Didn't go well. I had another shoulder surgery. So it's not like I hadn't had pain meds before. So I'd always seen medicine as medicine. It was just there to make you better. I didn't know the difference between an opioid, an ibuprofen, a Tylenol. It was just the doctor prescribed it. You take it because you need it for whatever you're going through. And then after college, I was drafted. So I was drafted by the Seattle Mariners, and I played in their minor league organization for a few years. Once again, this is all, continuing to build that my identity is a baseball player. And my value is found in, on a day in and day out basis, I found my value in how I performed each night. And and looking back on how unhealthy that was, but at the time I didn't know any better. And that kind of set me up for this big, the biggest thing in my life, basically, like this opioids taking me down in this dark path. So, then towards the end of my baseball career, my last season, I was at the plate, I swung, I dislocated my shoulder, and I was forced to have another surgery. And at this point, I'm 27 years old. I'm married. I feel as though like this is the end of my dream. Like this, my age, the age limit for a minor league baseball player to make it to where he wants to make it to the major leagues, it's a small window. And I was at the top end of that. And I just knew that this was kind of the end of that dream. And that night, after the game, I'm in the locker room, and my teammate, who was doing nothing but trying to help me, said, "Hey, you're going to be in a lot of pain and this will help you." And he handed me a pill, and he didn't tell me what it was. And I didn't ask, but I wasn't a drinker. I didn't drink a lot. I drank in college, but nothing crazy. I'd never abused drugs or alcohol before. But that night, I took this pill and I came home, and I remember how I was feeling right during and after that game, of just feeling like this devastation and this depression of like, what does this mean for your life, for your future, for your career? And I got home, and not only was my shoulder pain gone, but those emotions of depression and the uncertainty of what my life would look like, they all kind of went away too. They were numbed by this pill. This pill made me feel like euphoric. It made me feel like I forgot those things. And that was the moment that it hit me. And it didn't necessarily, it was a slow process from that point to where I got to a decade later. But that was the moment that this all started. And I can remember it very vividly, that, what it looked like, the locker room, like that evening, like I do remember all those details, and it stuck with me because that's the night that this all started. So.
Wow. So you initially took this first pill due to your pain, and it took all the pain away, and it made you feel good.
It made me feel good.
From that point on, you also mentioned that it took the depression away. So you're not hurting, you're not feeling, and you actually feel pretty fine.
Yeah.
So from that day on, you started.
So from that day on, it was very slow, right? That was a single pill that somebody gave me.
Right.
And I ended up playing the rest of that season. And I was given something called Celebrex, and I can't speak to exactly what that medicine is. I don't believe it's a narcotic, but it's a low dose of something that makes your body. I could play through the pain that I was going through with my shoulder. So on a daily basis, I was given this medication, and it made me physically able to deal with it and play. And at the end of that season, I had surgery on my shoulder, and my wife and I moved to Minnesota. It's the wintertime in Minnesota. It's dark. It's dreary. I'm having shoulder surgery. It's truly when I feel like this is the end of my career. What is next in my life? And I didn't feel like I had much going for me. I felt like I was way behind the curve. With all my friends started their professional lives years before I did, because I'm following my dream. And I'm stuck in this apartment. My wife is working. She's trying to make money for us to survive. I can't do anything. I feel pretty worthless. And I'm sitting at home and I have a prescription for these pills because I'm just after surgery. And it hits me at that point that, after I take it for the first couple, I'm like, I remember how this made me feel when I took it the first time. And sure enough, it's exactly how it made me feel in this, window after surgery. And that is when I knew I started taking them as prescribed, but then I ran out of that prescription. And so I asked the doctor for another one. And because this is 13 years ago at this point, it was prescribed more easily, or they didn't think too much about it. I think it's changed quite a bit these days, obviously for the best. But I got another prescription. And so then I wasn't in as much pain, but I told myself I was, and at this point, I'm not thinking I'm a drug abuser. I'm not thinking I'm addicted to anything. Like, this is very normal. I'm just after surgery, and I need a little bit more pain meds. I know it's helping me, feel better and kind of check out and numb those pains, but it's also, I need it. I'm saying I need it. And And slowly from there, like I said, this is a very slow progression over time. And I think people, obviously, some people it's right away that they become addicted to something, and some people it's over time. And I was a very slow process for me, but it all ends in the same dark place. Like no matter how quickly you get there or how slowly you get there, at some point, you know that this could be the thing that takes your life. And so from there, I would, opportunistically, take a pill from somebody here or there. If I was, at somebody's house, I took some from my aunt. The first time that I stole a pill was from my aunt's house. She had a prescription. I took just a couple. Once again, no big deal. This is no big deal. And at the same time, it's a huge deal. Like the moment that you steal a narcotic, that's a felony, right? And so you can normalize these things all you want, but the moment that you steal something, like that's a felony. I came from a normal background. I was from the Midwest, and I, like I said, I was pretty dang clean. I was, like the kid in high school was just like the straight and narrow. Like I was the designated driver, all these things. And all of a sudden I think to myself a little bit like, you just stole narcotics. Like you could go to prison for this, but then you sweep it under the rug because you know what, that was one time. That's not me. Like I don't have a problem. I'm just trying to cope with this at the moment, and it'll be fine. I can quit this anytime I want to.
I naturally want to know, Corey, how did you obtain these? Like if you had them for 10 years, did you keep going back to the same doctor? Or was there a point that he cut you off and said you don't need it anymore? Like, can you walk me through that side of things a bit?
Absolutely. That's a question I get a lot. And so, after baseball and after this surgery, I actually go back and play one more season, or start to play a season again. And the first series of the year, we're in Florida on the road, and we're in the locker room before a game, and I noticed that I'm pissing blood. Well, what do you know? I have a kidney stone. And so they take me to the ER. What do you know? I'm in a bad place again. I'm like, the season was just supposed to start. This is my last chance. Like, this is my last chance to follow this dream and like prove, to myself that I can reach my goal. I can make it to the major leagues. I just need to catch a break. Well, instead of catching a break, I get a kidney stone. They send me to the ER. And once again, there's more opioids right in my hand. And at that point, I'm taking these in a way that is, initially prescribed, but then, okay, I take it on the weekend, Friday, Saturday night, when I just want to chill out, and I can normalize that by saying, well, everybody does that with drinks too. I'm just doing it with a pill. Maybe mine's even safer, right? These are the things that go through your head. And so a kidney stone, and I get prescribed more pills. Well, then, a month or two later, my wife has a wisdom teeth pulled. She doesn't like her opioids. They make her feel terrible. Well, it's easy access for me because I'm like, I just want to veg out a little bit. I would just like to take these and kind of numb myself from what I'm going through. And later that year, I'm at the lake wakeboarding, and this is the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, is I herniated a disc in my back and prescribed more pain meds then. And what happened with that is that I think anybody who's gone through any type of sciatica or back pain, it becomes a crutch. It became a crutch for me. It became access for me because I could go to any doctor or walk-in clinic and say, I'm suffering through a sciatica issue. And whether that was true, whether that was a version of the truth, I knew that would give me access to these pills. And when I felt like I was either running out or I had quit, dumped some down the toilet, like at a certain point, I realized like this is a problem. Like you can't look yourself in the mirror anymore. That there's something going on here that's not, you can't normalize this. Yet I would continue to try to, but I knew that I was starting to abuse them on a heavier and heavier basis. And now I had more and more access to them.
Right. And so how far into this 10 years was it before you started realizing yourself that this was an issue? Were you in the first year, or how far into it was it?
I think for the first 2 years, I was probably like, it's not an issue. I could quit if I needed to, wanted to, and I would quit for a month at a time, 2 months at a time. If I didn't have access and I didn't have the balls to go in and ask somebody for these, because you're lying. Like you're going into a physician and lying about what you're going through in order to get these pills. Right. And so I'd be like, I don't need them. I don't need them anymore. But then something would come along. I'd want to numb myself from, whether it was, the fact that I was depressed, or I didn't feel like I had an identity anymore after baseball. That was the biggest thing for me, was I lost my identity after baseball. That's who I was. And now I don't have that anymore. And so I'm reeling to figure out, who am I and what is my worth, my value. Right. At the same time, my wife went back to school, and she is very type A when it comes to school. And she was like, I'm going to get straight A's no matter what. And what that does is, it's awesome. But for me, that felt like all of a sudden I get placed on the back burner. Our relationship really took a nosedive. And I correlated that with the fact that maybe she found my value in a baseball player too. Maybe that's who she fell in love with, and I'm not that anymore. And so my value to her is less as well. So it's just a series of unfortunate events. But over the first few years is when I started to realize, probably two years in, that this was more of an issue than just taking a pill here and there, like somebody would have a drink. Because the moment you can't look yourself in the face, look yourself in the mirror and truly like be okay with it, the moment you have to look away, like that's when you know you're struggling, and there's right. something more to this.
Now, you mentioned that during that time that you would quit for like a month or two, and I'm curious to know, is there like a withdrawal when you try to do something like that from opiates? Like, were you physically affected when you tried to quit on your own?
In the first few years, I used them so sparingly, I would say, that I didn't go through any real withdrawals. Later on, I did. Later in that 10-year period, I did. But for the first, and that's another thing, like you can say, well, I didn't go through withdrawals. And you can look, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I looked online and be like, do I have a problem or not? And there's like a checklist, right? Have you lost your job? Has your relationship suffered? Have you been caught by somebody? You know, there's all these like, yes, no. And I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm okay. Because I don't check 7 of these. I only check 5. So I'm good. This is what this thing says. Right.
Right.
And that's just a terrible way to look at it, but you're just trying to normalize it and make it feel like other people have the issue. You don't.
I think you bring up a good point right there, is that I personally believe that once anybody starts thinking that they might have a problem, they do. You know, if you're looking online, do I have a problem? That is your own little intuition inside of you telling you there's a problem, because if you didn't think you had a problem, you would not be looking that up online.
Oh, you're so right. The moment that is you admitting to yourself you have a problem, but without really admitting you have a problem. You're like, oh, I do, but I'm trying to find a reason to say I don't. But it's at the moment that you're looking at that, the moment that it's taking any part of your mental capacity to think about those things, like you have a problem. Like there's something there that needs help.
Listen Absolutely. Up, listeners. If you are in this situation right now and you are doing the same thing, you're listening to this podcast or you're looking online, wondering if you might have a problem with your drinking or your drug of choice, that is a key indicator that, yes, you probably do. Otherwise, these thoughts wouldn't cross your mind. But you're in prime position to do something about it. So I challenge you right now, if you're in that situation, try and quit for a month, try and quit for 6 months, and you're worth it.
Yeah. It doesn't discriminate, right? Like it does not discriminate. You know, I think that the hardest thing for some people to think is that it couldn't be me because I didn't go through this trauma as a kid. I didn't have this trauma. And it's just not true. Like drugs, alcohol, like any of these things, they do not discriminate. It doesn't matter how you grew up. You know, there's triggers for things, but it does not matter. Nobody in my life would have ever thought that I would be the person that would struggle with this. Nobody. And it's true because nobody did.
Right. So I can't believe that you kept this all like a secret for 10 years. So when you were taking these pills for 10 years, were you hiding the bottle in your house from your wife?
Yeah, I wouldn't keep them in a bottle, right? Because if there was no reason for me to have a bottle of these, then that would stand out, right? So I would hide them in places. I mean, I would hide them.
That's another addictive behavior right there. Right, if you're hiding your prescription, that's not normal or that's not right.
Yeah, there is there are so many signs. There are so many signs that you have a problem, but when you are keeping it your own secret, and I'll go back because you asked me, how do I keep this a secret, right? And okay, physically, I can tell you how I hid them, right? But pills are small. You can hide them anywhere.
Right.
The reason that this was able to be my own secret for so long is because I had no track record of drug abuse, of, abusing alcohol. Nobody in my life thought twice that even if somebody was like, man, he kind of seemed off today, or, he just seemed like he zoned out, there would never be a reason to assume that it was something like me popping pills. Never.
Right.
And so even if that inkling came into somebody's head, it was never, acted upon, or nobody asked me, because it couldn't possibly be me. That's just like, I knew that that's how people looked at me. I was put on a pedestal from the time I was in high school because of who I was. I mean, I was, like I said, I was a stand-up athlete. I got good grades. Like I had a life on the outside that everybody thought, man, this guy has it all together. What a life this guy lives. And I'm just like, if you only knew, only knew.
Wow. So I'm really interested now to see how did your brother respond when you woke him up at 5:30 in the morning and blurted out, I have a problem? Like, he must have just been in shock. How did he respond to that?
So he was in shock. He was in shock. B, I felt really, really like amazing, as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because I thought for so long, like, Corey, like, if you just tell somebody who loves you that, like, you're struggling, like, you can get help, you can beat this. You just need to say it. And so the moment that I said it to him, man, did I feel like, oh my God, I finally said it. I couldn't stop crying, like, for 2 straight days, but like, at least I said it. And like, these were finally, emotions are coming out to this. But his reaction was, initially, he just listened. And then he's like, Chris, probably isn't a big deal. Like, a lot of people do this. Like, you're probably making this bigger than it is. And I said, I'm not. Let me tell you why I'm not. Let me tell you the places I've been and the things that I've done. And then you can try and tell me that this is normal, because it's not, right? Like, it almost put me in this position of like, I have to now tell you why this is a big deal. And it was a really good position to be in. Instead of me saying, maybe you're right, maybe this isn't a big deal, I felt like, no, it is, because this has taken over my life. So I now almost have to defend how bad this is to you, because I can't come out and say this and then go back to it again. Like, I can't let this be the moment that I said it. And then I actually felt guilt too, because I felt like my wife should have been the one to know. Like, I felt like for so long I wanted her to know. I mean, we'd been married for 13 years. And like, I always felt like, man, I'm living this lie. And for so long I thought, I think because I was high functioning, at a certain point, I thought to myself, well, if I can just kick this by myself, then nobody has to know. Not even my wife has to know about this. Like, we can move on with our life, and I'll just be clean and nobody will know. And after it kept progressing, and I started to realize, like, your relationship will never be authentic and real if she doesn't know this dark place that you've been in for the good part of our marriage. So even if I was able to quit myself somehow, which I was never able to, then my relationship is never going to be real. If she doesn't know this about me, how can we be 75 years old and sitting together, whatever, and she not know this? And so, so that was a little bit of a guilt of her not being the first one to know. But looking back now, my wife can say, like, that was like, my brother was there for a reason. Like, he was the person that I was supposed to tell at that time, because it just was. And there's no ill will about it. It was just like, I needed somebody to talk to, and he was the perfect one to be that person. So, well,
I applaud you for taking that leap of faith. Like you said, you've been hanging on to this secret for 10 years. You finally reach this desperation where you call out to a hotline. They transfer you. There's nobody on the other line, and you just have this act of desperation that you haven't had in the last 10 years. You wake up your brother, you tell your brother what's going on. Then you almost have to prove it. Why you think it's addictive and why you think it's a problem. So from there, telling your brother, and you're in the middle of this big move. How soon after that do you tell your wife, and what happens after you expose this secret?
Sure. So I flew back 2 days later to Nebraska to pick them up. Basically, I was going to fly back, we were going to board a plane 2 days later with my wife and kids to come back to Seattle. And so I told my brother, here's the deal. I'm flying home tomorrow. You know, he knows this obviously. And I'm like, if you haven't heard from me by 9:00 that I text you and say, like, I'm telling Nikki, then you need to call Nikki and tell her that Corey has something to tell you. Like,
wow.
Like I needed a backstop because I tried, you know, for so long I wanted to get help and ask, and I'd be really close to doing it, but I never could do it. And so I felt like even though I came clean to my brother, and now like somebody knows he's going to hold me accountable, he'll help hold me accountable. But I just knew that like this is going to be the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is go back and tell my wife of 13 years that for 10 years of our marriage, I've held this secret that you don't know about that has affected me in ways you can't even imagine. So yeah, he was my backstop. He was my, if you haven't heard from me, you need to call Nikki and tell her Corey needs to tell you something.
Good for you.
And so that night, I mean, I get in, they pick me up. I mean, my wife and kids come to the airport to pick me up. We have an hour drive back to my parents' house where we're currently living. And you know, how I acted halfway normal enough to not have that conversation in the car. I just didn't want to have it in front of my kids. They were really, really little at the time. And I was like, this needs to obviously just be between Nikki and I in a place where we can actually talk. So somehow I held it together. You know, the whole flight home, I sat there with my head in my hands, just like bawling, this, there's a really good chance that this, when I come to her, that she'll say that this is too much. And maybe this is not what I signed up for. Right. And I couldn't have blamed her, you know, but that whole flight home, I think to myself, like, this might be it. Like, right. Maybe my marriage is over. Maybe the relationship with my kids is going to change, and we're going to, you know, I don't know. Like, there's so many unknowns, but there's no choice. It was just, it had to happen. So,
so how do you let her know, and how does she respond?
So that evening we put the kids to bed. We go to our room, close the door, and I just, you know, I said, you know, I have something I need to tell you. And then I couldn't say anything, and I couldn't say anything. I'm like, how do I say it? Like, what are the words you say? And she was finally like, Corey, what the fuck is going on? Like, do you have cancer? Like, what's going on? You know, her head is going anywhere. And I just said, like, I've been abusing opioids for 10 years. And she looked at me just like it wasn't reality. You know, I mean, like, there's no reason that she would have thought this, you know, it was completely
shocking. How do you process
out of nowhere? So we, you know, so without going, like, I mean, we spent 4 hours talking and bawling, and her asking all these questions, and you know, it was a terrible conversation and a good conversation. We cried, we hugged, she, you know, yelled at me, like, you know, it was literally the gamut of emotions. And she's like, we need to go talk to somebody. She's like, I need to talk to a professional. Like, I can't just like take your word for this. Like, we need to go see somebody. So the next day we called a therapist, a family friend who we'd seen one other time, like a decade ago, about just family issues, that somebody we knew we had in our back pocket if we needed to talk. And it was a Sunday, and we were like, please, will you see us? And he was like, well, you know, I got this. I was like, please, God, will you see us? And so he gave us 2 hours of his day, and we went in and, you know, just divulged all of it to a therapist, and helped us find like the words to use, and like the game plan to go forward, and who I needed to contact once we got to Seattle, how, you know, what kind of therapist I needed to talk to. It just helped to get us a game plan and give us some confidence that, like, that I could beat this, that I'm asking for help, that this is something that if I make a choice, like I can beat this. And for my wife, it gave her confidence that, like, okay, we have a game plan, we have accountability, and now we have somebody who knows. And it just gave us a little bit of confidence that, like, we could try to move forward. I mean, there was many ultimatums about, like, what would happen if I went back, if I kept secrets, all those things.
Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Are you done with addiction and tired of drinking all the time? Do you have a game plan on how to get clean and sober? If you need extra help to start your journey in recovery, We have an excellent option for you in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, at Recovery in Paradise, where we offer a 90-day inpatient recovery program. If you're serious about recovery, why not start in paradise with us at Recovery in Paradise, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico? Please check out our website for all our information at www.recoveryinparadisepv.com.
And that day, it became like a daily motto that I would have to, not have to, but I would get to tell my wife, like, I choose us. Before I'd leave, before I go do anything, I choose us. And that was just a way of saying that I choose us over drugs, over anything else, without having to say, like, I won't do drugs again. It was like a more of a positive, like, I choose us. I choose you and our family over any of those things.
Wow. So literally, the truth will set you free. Literally, by you divulging this 10-year secret of guilt and shame and becoming an addict, by you just opening your mouth and letting that secret out, it set you free. It was a turning point in your life. Is that right?
I mean, it's completely the truth. And I think that's, where we all live a little bit, some of us, addicts and in recovery is I think my message for the most part is that there's no cookie cutter approach to how to get help and how you can get clean. There's a lot of ways out there and there's a lot of beliefs, but know that if you're struggling, there are ways to get help, that you can beat your darkness, your addiction, your shame, and to each their own. Like there's things that work for some people that don't work for others, and vice versa. And for me, I went to therapy. I started to dig into the whys. Like, what voids was I trying to fill? What was I trying to numb? Like, what are the things I hadn't dealt with that were the reason that I kept on taking these pills to numb myself from feelings of not feeling like I was good enough, not having an identity, not being able to have authentic relationships because of all these things. And so therapy for me was the turning point of taking ownership of the things that I was trying to numb and the voids I was trying to fill. And it started to make so much sense to me. I started to feel things again. I remember, like feeling terrible about a conversation my wife and I had, and I told my therapist, and I'm like bawling, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong? She's like, nothing's wrong. Like, you're bawling because it hurts, and that's supposed to hurt, and you're not supposed to numb it with things. Like, this is life, and so that became just that outlet to speak to her, and for us to like go down this path of trying to figure it all out and enlighten myself on the whys, because I feel like if you can find out why, then you can start to work on those whys.
That's right. Wow. And I bet you that took a lot for you to come out and say that to your wife and your brother and yourself, that you had a problem. But obviously you guys are still together. You're on a vacation together right now without the kids. So I'm sure it's opened up a stronger and bigger and better communication, because that is being totally vulnerable, to let all that out on the table.
I mean, Dora, so that is like the beauty of all of this. Like, I tell people that I would never wish this upon anybody, but I would never take it back for myself. I mean, and that is the God's honest truth. Like, and it's crazy to think that, but the fact that I finally came to my wife and we had this conversation has opened the doors for so many conversations that you never thought you could have. I mean, it's kind of funny. We say that, the relationship of your dreams is on the other side of hard conversations, because if you're not real, then it's not really a real conversation or a real relationship. And there's nothing we can't talk about now. Like, the huge benefit of me telling her about my opioid abuse has been that we can talk about anything, that there's nothing taboo. There's nothing that's off the table. It is like, we are able to, in real time, for the most part, voice like the things that, like, if something's bugging us or we're struggling with something, we can talk about it, because if you can talk about that, you can talk about anything. And it has been a huge benefit to our relationship. I mean, that's crazy to think that, because this this 10 years of addiction and abuse went from being the darkest thing in my life to now, like, there's so much meaning in it. It's become overcoming that. I mean, sure, maybe you feel the same way. I think a lot of people who overcome drugs and alcohol and any traumas, like, you realize how strong you really are. Like, all of a sudden you feel like you've gained a superpower you didn't know you had. Like, if I can do and beat this, there's literally nothing I can't do. And it's a very empowering feeling to have that. And you start to see it as a blessing a little bit. Like, I went through this so that I could know I could become this. And it makes it worth it.
What you and I are doing right here by sharing our own experience, our stories can help others that are still in that place of secrecy or isolation or addiction, just by hearing you say how you got through that and where it took you to, and, that you're a professional athlete. Our stories, I believe, and I hope, help other people. In the beginning of my own recovery, I still had a lot of shame. The first thing is asking for help. But then for the first year, I would say I still carried a lot of shame. When these feelings are coming back now, now I'm unthawing, I'm unnumbing, because I'm not drinking, I'm not drugging. So I am emotional, I am crying. And I feel like a bag of shit for all the things I've done, for all these secrets. So in the beginning of recovery, they say don't leave before the miracle happens. And in the beginning, I just thought I was a horrible person. I couldn't come to terms with what I had done for so many years. But now I've reached this part in my recovery, which I believe you're at too, where I see that this is my superpower. Like you said, our stories will be the survival kits of other people out there. Will help them find their voice.
And Dora, you're totally right. Like, it's so easy to go through our stories and like skim through, right? We only have a certain amount of time to tell your story, but the darkness and the shame on the other side of asking for help is true. It's real. It doesn't just change overnight. Like, you don't just ask for help and all of a sudden it's all gravy. Like, that's complete BS. You feel not worthy. You feel like you have hurt people in ways that you never thought you could. You feel like you don't deserve anything. Like, I mean, there's a lot of those feelings that come up, but it forces you to feel them. It forces you to like work through them. And in the past, I would have just taken a pill because it makes those go away. It just suppressed them. But now you have to feel them. And there's something empowering about having to feel them, right? Like, you feel like, man, I do not want to feel this. But then you realize that, like, you're stronger than you thought you were, and you can make it through these things. And to your point of our stories too, I think that's obviously the reason you're out sharing yours, and you have this podcast and you're sharing stories for people to hear that there's hope, that there's joy, that there's all these things on the other side, that just because you're in that dark place now doesn't mean it has to end in a dark place. And
never too late to change.
And one thing real quick, and why I decided to share mine, because I feel as though anybody who's a high functioning addict or alcoholic or anything like that, I think it's really easy for us to decide not to share, because not many people in our life know about it. Because if we get help and we become clean and in recovery, then you can really keep it your secret. I mean, I really could have. Like, my wife and brother could have been the only ones who had to know, besides my therapist. Like, if I really wanted to keep it that way. And for 2 years I did. I thought to myself, like, why tell people, like, you're just going to be judged and shamed and all these things. But then I remembered so badly looking for examples of somebody like me, somebody who still had it together, who still had a job, who had a relationship. And yet I couldn't find any of those stories out there. And I just felt like I am so isolated and alone. Like, how can you be the only person who is battling this by themselves and nobody knows, but you're able to keep your job and you're able to, like, on the outside look like you have it all together. And I just felt like I could be the story that I was looking for. I could be the story that makes somebody not feel alone, because I think a lot of people do struggle in that gray area of, like, they're not the addict on the street who's overdosed or, like, there's so many stories of the really, really dark stuff. And I'm like, well, some people struggle in the middle of this area, and it's a slow process, and it'll take us to that point. It'll take me there. I mean, I did plenty of things that I thought were going to end my life. But for the most part, those 10 years are spent in this gray area of, do I have a problem? And I don't see any other examples of me.
now, back to the Soberoso Podcast with your host, Dora Gosselin.
And, another slogan I've heard is that, our secrets are what keep us sick. So in my own case and probably in yours, and in the beginning stages of recovery, the first thing is just the drinking or the drugging. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I drank and drugged for 30 years, and I'm still surprised at how quickly that physical part of it and the craving left.
Yeah.
Like that physical aspect of it. But what happens is when I stopped drinking and drugging after 30 years, the craving, the obsession left. But then, as you mentioned, then the feelings coming down. Then it's, how do I cope with this? I used to shove a drink in that when I felt like anxious, or I used to, take a whatever to have courage or to get through this emotion, So it's really learning how to be human and to feel. And that is all a part of people, of who we are. We are human with feelings, we weren't born to mask them. There's a natural, we got anger, we got sad, we got love, happy, we got joy. I mean, those are all a natural rainbow of emotions that every person feels. So why we feel that we have to shut those down and become inhuman and unhuman it doesn't have to be that way.
I mean, in those feelings, like we're all human, and sharing my story, the things that I was worried about people at work finding out, about all these people finding out, they were all fear-based, because what I've been met with is people saying like, I struggled with this, I've struggled with that. It has become this connection of like, we all struggle, everybody struggles. And being authentic and sharing it, has been like so therapeutic for myself, right? To just be able to say it out loud. Like there's power in saying it. And two is there's connection in it too, because we all struggle. And the people that you go to work with and you see on a regular basis that you think has it all together, just like everybody looked at me, we don't. And to be able to have deeper conversations and then how's the weather and, what'd you do last weekend has been an amazing benefit of this, because now I go to work and, interact with people, and we can actually talk about real things. We can talk about the good, the bad, the struggles, and it's like, it just peeled back the onion, and now like you can have real conversations. And that's been a huge joy for me.
Wonderful. So I'm curious, Corey, to know, you mentioned when you first started taking these opiates that, you took it for an injury, but you also mentioned that you felt good and you didn't feel depressed. So I'm curious, if it's too deep for me to ask, let me know, but once you came out about your addiction and stopped your drug addiction and using your drug of choice, did you ever find an underlying cause of depression that you treated?
I should, like, the depression, I guess, was more based on the circumstances at that point in my life of the losing my identity through baseball, finding all my self-value in being a baseball player, the feeling like my relationship was suffering because I thought I was less of somebody, and now my wife thought I was less of a person too. And because I felt like professionally, I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I felt like all my friends have it together and they have money and they're doing this and that. And we're just fumbling through. And so those are the points in my therapy that I was able to kind of work through, and even look back further on as a child, in elementary school, of how I found my value and who I was and how I, was accepted into certain social circles based on being an athlete and these things, but not truly like ever feeling like I was divulging myself. So no, I mean, yes, I've worked through those through therapy, but I had when I say depressed, I guess it's more of like based on those circumstances,
Right.
and working through them. So
If somebody out there is listening to this show right now and they are a high functioning addict or alcoholic that, has their life together, they got the job, they got the wife, but they are looking outside to see if they might have a problem similar to your situation, what would you tell them with your words to encourage them?
yeah, I mean, I would say that life can be so much better than what you're doing right now, because even if you're high functioning, it will continue to digress. Like your life will not continue to be high functioning. I mean, even if it looks like it from the outside, you will continue to deteriorate on the inside. Ask for help before it gets to the point where it gets harder and harder, or something really, really bad happens. I mean, I never bought heroin off the street, but I know that's where my life was headed. I mean, I know that's the path. That's what happens. It's just faster for others and slower for others. But ask for help, because man, on the other side of this is joy and fulfillment and confidence, the self-confidence, like keeping the promises yourself, staying clean, staying sober, being in recovery. Like, it's a daily promise to yourself, and it builds confidence in a daily basis. And drugs and alcohol, they destroy your self-confidence. There's a reason you can't look yourself in the mirror, and it's because of that. So keeping promises to yourself is like the path for me. That's like my motto. If you keep daily promises, you can do anything. And for me, that's the truth.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree more. And I also believe that there are many gifts when you find sobriety. And like you said, find somebody that loves you, that you feel close to, and just tell them you have a problem. That is the first step. And I think that a lot of us, when we're in active addiction or alcoholism, we have these minds that just make up all these scenarios, why I can't tell on myself, or why I can't ask for help. We have this way of projecting, how our life is we're going to lose everything as we know it. Everything's going to come to a screeching halt. But if you really reach out to somebody that loves you and tell them that you're struggling, that is the beginning of a beautiful journey. You will be surprised at how willing people are, just, first of all, that you're honest and vulnerable and will jump to the gun to help you. So
yeah, that fear that is in your head about how you'll be met if you come out and ask for help or tell somebody is just that. I mean, it is like, I can't tell you anybody who I've come to and told that hasn't met me with support and love. Like it is a fear in your head, and you make it up, that because you don't feel like you're worth it. Like, you think that you're just going to be kicked to the curb because you don't think you're worth it. And that's what other people think. And it's just not the truth.
Now, Corey, I noticed on your Instagram feed that I'm following you have under there that you're a motivational speaker. So have you taken this whole experience to a different level? And could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, so I'm a big believer in, you put your goals out there, and then you will achieve them. You speak them out loud. You tell them, you give it power. And so at this point, that is what I'm working towards. I feel like my story can serve others. I feel like we didn't touch on it, but a big part of my keeping promises on a daily basis was the fact that I know I can do hard things. I came clean. I beat opioids. Like, I can do hard things. And so proof to myself of that was I decided to take on an Ironman endurance race. And so Ironman is a race where you swim 2.4 miles, you bike 112, and then you run a marathon at the end, 26.2.
Wow.
And I always thought to myself, like, man, those people are freaking badass. Like, how in the hell do they do that? And I beat opioids, and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm a badass. Like, I can do this. Like, I've never done anything like it. So I started to train on a daily basis, and I just kept promises day in and day out, day in and day out. And I started there and thought, like, how could I possibly, make it to the end of that race when I can barely run 2 miles on the first day of training? But sure as hell, day in and day out, I kept a promise, and I kept training, I kept doing it. And, 8 months later, I finished my first Ironman, and it just felt like, once again, the superpower of beating your addiction truly makes you not just feel like, but you truly can do anything. Like, you truly can. Like, that's the hardest thing that you're going to do in your life. And so it becomes your superpower.
Oh, I absolutely love it. How encouraging. And you and many other guests that I have had on the show, it's incredible to see how so many of us beat addiction, and not only beat it, but we turn our whole lives around and come out not like we used to be before addiction, but better than, like living with purpose and completely better than, like accelerating in different areas, like the Iron Man. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
Dora, isn't it crazy that this thing that we held as for myself as this secret, this horrible dark thing that I never wanted to speak out loud, I never wanted to tell anybody to know for so long, for 10 years, didn't want anybody to know. And now on the other side of it, I'm like, this is what I want to share. Like, it became like this 180 of like the thing that I was so ashamed of is now become this thing that I'm so proud of. Like, that I'm so proud that I beat this, that I have no fucking problem sharing it with whoever wants to talk about it, because it became the thing that I want to share, the thing that I think will give purpose to my life and to others. It's like, I found this thing through the darkest thing in my life. I have now found the purpose on the other side. And it's like, it's a crazy, ironic, spin on it.
It is fantastic. And that's the whole, reason of this Soberoso podcast. It not only helps me heal and help me own my story, but I hope that it's, lighting a path for others that still might be suffering in addiction, and to see that we do turn it around and we become incredible human beings, giving back in ways that are just beautiful.
Yeah. One last thing, Dora, if you are somebody out there that's struggling and you're just, and you're contemplating asking for help, and you do, once you are on the side of you've spoke it and you're in this group of people in recovery, in this group of people who are fighting to change the stigma on these things, like, you join a community of people that you can reach out to and talk to about these things on a regular basis. I mean, I can't tell you, I never shared all of this with anybody in my life. And now I feel like just through the last 6 months of me sharing my story and meeting people in this, amazing group of people, I can reach out and call people and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this, or I came across somebody who was going through this and it made me think about this. Like, you join a group of people who are amazingly strong and willing to help others.
That's right. A recovery community. We are out there, and there's many people that are going to reach their hands out and help you along your way if you're just at the beginning of your journey, because we do recover and we do it together, stronger together.
Absolutely.
All right, Corey. Well, thank you for being a part of Soberoso Podcast. And before I let you go, can you please tell us how we can find you?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at Corey Harrington Anew, CoreyHarrington, and then Anew, ANEW. I'm also on Facebook, and working on a site just to be able to have something up there to share my story, which will be CoreyHarringtonAnew.com. But right now I'm trying to share as much as I can about my story to make people feel like they're not alone.
Perfect. And you're doing a fantastic job of it. So thank you again for being here today. And you just keep doing what you're doing. Keep sharing. Sharing is caring.
You too, Dora. I appreciate you letting me be a guest and speak to your community, because it's awesome what you're doing, and it's awesome what all of us are doing to remove the taboo of this topic. So I appreciate it.
All right, beautiful peeps. Thank you for joining us again on the Soberoso Podcast. If you missed last week's episode, please back up and check it out. It's called Addiction and Mental Health Matters, where I share my personal experience with addiction and mental health matters in honor of May being Mental Health Awareness Month. Also, next week we have a very special guest joining us. Her name is Natalie, and she is going to be talking with us all about fetal alcohol spectrum and syndrome, and educating us on pregnancy and how drinking affects a baby. It's a fantastic episode that's going to educate us. I was educated, and I can't wait to share it with you. If you are enjoying the Soberoso Podcast, please wear and share your passion for recovery by checking out our online merch for all of our his and hers recovery-related t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and wear a message of hope and sobriety. Until the next time, stay safe, stay sober, and to thine own self be true.
Please hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to the Soberoso Podcast and help us normalize conversations around alcoholism and addiction recovery. You can join us on Instagram and Facebook at Soberoso and follow your host, Dora Gosselin, on Clubhouse. You are not alone, and we do recover. Wear and share your passion for recovery with our His and Hers merch. Visit us at www.soberoso.com.